Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. I just wanted to make another quick update from the situation in Germany right now. There are many protests this week in Germany, some already on Saturday, others are scheduled for tomorrow, Sunday. There are many smaller ones, but the biggest one on Saturday would be in Leipzig again, and the largest one to be expected at least tomorrow will be in Berlin. In Leipzig, it is actually not one big demonstration, it is several events, and they were allowed by the authorities actually. But once again, of course, under very restrictive conditions. That means wearing a mask or presenting a valid doctor's note that you are exempt from wearing a mask. And social distancing, of course. And there are very, very low capacity limits for these public squares. So for one of the squares in Leipzig, the authorities said that 500 people would be the maximum capacity. That is, of course, very little for a marketplace. One of the protests was also cancelled after the authorities did not accept one of these said doctor's notes, these mask exemptions that the person who registered the protest was presenting. So after his doctor's note was declined, he also pulled back his application actually. Very strange story in my opinion, but this is what I read in the media. Now the situation in Leipzig today is described as a cat and mouse game. That means there are these very diverse, very mixed groups of protesters against the lockdowns, against the hygiene regulations. And on the other side, there are far left groups like Antifa, for example, and they are trying to confront them physically actually. They want to use violence against them. And the police is somewhere in the middle trying to keep both groups away from each other, to keep them apart. This time law enforcement is prepared very well. They brought water cannons, tanks and helicopters. And they say it is very hard to keep these antagonists apart because they are not in one place, but there are many smaller groups all over the city, and the authorities have to try to catch them whenever they can, to get in between them, to separate them in order to prevent, injuries and bad things happening. And while the anti-establishment protesters are chanting, "Dear police, please let us pass," the other side, and I would at this point call them the thugs of the establishment, they are pro-establishment, well, not really protesters, but agents at this point, I would say, and that is Antifa. They are not asking nicely, but they try to attack, of course. So this time I have to say that I don't envy the authorities, law enforcement, the police, for the job that they have, trying to keep these groups apart, even though one is definitely more aggressive than the other, but that doesn't make their job easier. That is not a nice assignment. And it must be weird to serve as an officer of the state, and then you must actually protect dissidents from, let's say, unofficial agents of the state. That must be a very weird situation, quite frankly. So I hope that during the night it will not escalate. I hope it stays more or less peaceful. It's not peaceful, of course, but that at least nothing super bad happens. And I really wonder if the protest in Berlin will be allowed by the authorities or if they try to ban it on the last second again. But as I said, also in other towns all over Germany, there are smaller protests taking place. And maybe this is just because people want to do something in a community, to do something together, especially at this time of the year. I talked about this at length. There is a desire, there is a need for community and doing things together. And if they're not allowed to do nice things together, like, having just some spiced wine, some Glühwein, some hot wine on a Christmas market, well, maybe then they do this instead. But that is something one could have seen coming actually. Alright, I try to keep you updated if something major happens, but this is it for the time being. Servus, Kameraden.